Hi, my name's Jon Smart, and I'm going to talk about organising for outcomes. And first of all, a health warning. Rigid, one-size-fits-all forced org design seriously harms you and others around you. There is no playbook or blueprint. Watch out if somebody approaches you with a playbook on organising for outcomes. This is about organisational evolution in context. There is no one size fits all in terms of how people organise to get stuff done. So that's the health warning. The question to ask is, what are you optimising for today? Every organisation is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. That's a quote from Arthur W. Jones, who spent his entire career working on org design. The question is, what are you optimizing for? Are you consciously optimizing for anything? Because you're definitely, and your organization is definitely optimized for something. The next question is, what do you want to optimize for? Do you know what outcomes you want? And are they being measured? So usually when I ask these questions, the answer is don't know, no, and no. Don't know what we want to optimize for, we don't know what the outcomes are we want, and absolutely they're not being measured because we don't know what they are, so we couldn't measure them anyway if we wanted to. Even when organizations can articulate desired outcomes to go after, 99 times out of 100 they are not being measured. So the pattern here is to focus on the outcomes you're going after. So on the topic of organizing for outcomes, we need to know what outcomes we're going after. For example, and these are a set of outcomes which I have found to work in every organisation so far, now working across many organisations globally. The first one is better, which is quality. Then there's value, which is unique. It's unique to every organisation, value for the producer and value for the consumer. Sooner, which is the heart of agile and lean. Some good measures for sooner are lead time, throughput, and flow efficiency. Safer is continuous compliance. It's agile, not fragile. And happier is happier customers, colleagues, citizens, and climate. It's not about improving ways of working at any cost to society or to the planet. So these are a balanced set of outcomes. I learned this lesson the hard way myself. Back in the past, we were too focused on the capital A agile word and the capital T transformation word. We were measuring all the wrong things. We were measuring how many agile teams do we have? How many product owners do we have? How many teams are using Jira? How many people have we trained in agile in the last 6 months? So, and you could be doing all of that, you can be measuring all of that, but it can be cargo cult. You can have new labels on the same old behavior. So you have to focus on the outcomes you're going after and measure them. Size of the prize, the benefits we saw at an organisation with 100,000 people, we saw a 20 times improvement in quality. On average, teams were 3 times sooner time to value. The best teams were 20 times sooner. We had a positive compliance trend, and we had the happiest ever colleagues with a positive client net promoter score trend. So we had better value, sooner, safer, happier. It took 3.5 years across 100,000 people at an organisation which was 330 years old, and it required executive committee support and sponsorship, and everything was in scope. So the anti-patterns here, when it comes to organising for outcomes, again, as I said, the first anti-pattern is a rigid one-size-fits-all forced playbook with no alignment to measurable outcomes. So, for example, we're going to roll out squads, tribes, chapters and guilds. We're going to do the so-called Spotify model, and we're going to declare success. Reorganization done equals transformation done. The Spotify model equals agility. And at some organizations, there will be either a big bang or a series of big bangs or a series of medium bangs. And people have to reapply for their roles. There's competition to be a tribal leader because it comes with power and money. And the view is that when we've rolled out gone from role-based silos to squads, tribes, chapters and guilds, or words to that effect, transformation is done. Everything is magically improved. Of course, then the dawning realization is, oh my goodness, it's just day one. And then the third anti-pattern is cost-cutting led org design, spans and layers 2.0. So, for example, a commitment at an AGM, a desire by the executive committee or a senior leadership team to cut costs, and translating that at the same time as to a reorg. So we're going to let 10 to 20,000 people go, and at the same time we're going to roll out squads, tribes, chapters and guilds, and agile, and don't worry, everything will be fine. People will be more productive than they were before, even though 10 to 20,000 people have lost their jobs. And I have seen that anti-pattern implemented a number of times. I've seen all three of these anti-patterns, as I'm sure a number of you have seen as well, at large organisations. I don't believe that optimises for outcomes, those anti-patterns. So how did we get here? How did we get to this point in terms of organising, how people organise to get stuff done? 1.9 million years ago, we were organised in multidisciplinary teams, also known as a tribe. There are fossilised footprints from nearly 200 million years ago from our early bipedal ancestors. We were hunting and gathering together. I think there's something like a group of 47 individuals in these fossilised footprints. We have evolved to survive in multidisciplinary teams. We work together. Fast forward to 254 years ago, 1770, and we have a full stack team. Domestic cotton ops, you weave it, you wear it. Even 254 years ago, we have a multidisciplinary team. This was in the context of textiles. It was the putting out system. You'd have domestic family members working at home, and it was a multidisciplinary team. You weave it, you wear it. And then, and it's no coincidence that this starts with a waterfall, everything changed, starting in 1771, 253 years ago. And this is the world's first factory system at scale. This is Crompton Mills in Derbyshire. The building on the right is the world's first factory. This is, for the first time, the place where there are more than 1,000 people working together. The building on the right is the old factory. The building on the left is the new factory, because it's only 250 years old rather than 253 years old. And in this building, there were 1,000 people, like I said, and there were about approximately 15 role-based specialities. We have division of labour, role-based silos, and work passing at scale for the first time ever. We have extreme division of labour. I was fortunate enough to do a site visit, myself and some friends. We happened to be in the area. We went along and we ended up having a guided tour, and it's deeply fascinating. This is Sir Richard Arkwright. He is the founder of the factory system. And unfortunately, at the time, there was no law around employing children. And out of those 1,000 people working in the factory, 75% of the workers were children, for two main reasons. One, because children are small, so they could fit underneath the automated machinery. And second, they are cheap, which might actually be the primary reason that Sir Richard Arkwright would employ so many children. There are adverts in newspapers at the time advertising for entire families to come and work at this factory, with the advert stating that we can employ all of your family members. So the entire family would be working. And another world's first, the world's first worker housing was built. So there was a purpose-built village with worker housing and a pub and a shop and a church. And people would work in very tough conditions for very long hours. The bell would ring at 6 a.m. and it would ring again at 6 p.m. There'd be a change of shift, and workers would be doing 12-hour shifts with very few breaks. So this is the beginning of role-based silos at scale. And then 1855, we're now in the second technology-led revolution, the age of steam and railways. We have the world's first org chart. This is the plan of an organisation for the New York and Erie Railroad. And this was put together by Daniel McCallum. Daniel McCallum was a Scotsman by birth, and he emigrated to the States, to USA, and he worked his way up to become the general superintendent of the New York and Erie Railroad. And he was ahead of his time. This org chart, the senior leadership team are at the bottom, not at the top, which I really like. And it's kind of drawn like a plant. And the senior leaders at the bottom are effectively like the bulb of the plant, the roots of the plant. And the nutrients will be going up, supporting the people working in the organisation, which I really like. I really like it being that way round, and that notion. And I like the artistry of this as well. The reason that org charts came about at this time was because of the length of the railroads. In a textile mill, you can manage by walking around. With the length of the railroads, you can't manage by walking around, and it takes too long for a decision to be bubbled all the way back up to the head office, or to be taken by horse and a messenger all the way back to the head office in New York, and then a decision to go all the way back out again to the end of the line. So we have the world's first writing on middle management at this time as well. And Daniel McCallum wrote about empowered middle managers. He effectively in this org chart, we see multidisciplinary teams. And he also wrote about the importance of a data feedback loop and continuous improvement, which is the first time we have this type of writing. And then 1905, here is an updated version of the org chart. It starts to shift and we start to see the senior leaders at the top. This is Organising a Factory by Clinton Edgar Woods. And to quote Clinton Edgar Woods, chart authorities simply and graphically so that every workman knows to whom he is responsible. There is then no loophole through which a neglectful workman, foreman or executive can crawl. No longer does he have the excuse that he thought somebody else was going to do it. Interesting language, a language of no loophole through which anybody can crawl. Again, it's a very negative mindset of people escaping. If they have the chance, they will escape their responsibilities. And as you can see in the picture on the left, we now have leadership at the top. Now the writing now had shifted to talk about the organisation chart as with the brains at the top. So a little like the human body, the narrative in the writing is that the brains are at the top, directing the rest of the organisation. So this is a different mindset. This is a mindset shift to managers, directors, even that word director, directing, telling people what to do. You can see there the word authority on that picture. So this is where we see, along with the scientific management, and we're now in the third industrial revolution, the age of steel and heavy engineering. There is a noticeable shift with Taylorism and scientific management to managers telling workers what to do. And that's what scientific management is. It is somebody, in Taylor's words, who is a different class. Educated managers who will tell a worker exactly what activities to do and exactly how long it should take. If it takes longer, you get less than your day's pay. If you do it quicker, you'll get a bonus. It was all driven by a financial incentive and a lack of autonomy. For the very first time, we have the planning department, a predecessor to the PMO, the project management office, and we have instruction cards, like I said, and the planning office, the planning department would plan work for all of the workers in the factory. And then in terms of division of labour and role-based silos and work passing, so it continued. It continued through the third industrial revolution, through the fourth industrial revolution, and in some organisations it is still the way of working today, where we have role-based silos with work passing. We have a command and control, typical leadership behaviour, do as I say, not as I do, hierarchical, a culture of fear. Many of these characteristics are still alive in organisations today. This picture obviously is a picture of a cube farm. I have had the unfortunate displeasure of working in that environment a couple of times in my career, where everyone, you have to, only if you stand up can you see over the cube. And this is not optimizing for ways of working today in the age of digital. So the current state for many organizations is we have, in quotes, the business. This is a Deming inside joke. We have the head of planning, the head of doing, the head of checking, and the head of reacting. Not plan, do, check, act in nice little small circles, but rather different departments for planning, different department for doing, a different department for checking, and a different department for acting or reacting. And then the usual starting point for organisations, because of previous ways of working, is we then have what used to be called business relationship management, a go-between between information technology, between IT and, in quotes, the business. Some organisations have product, and they have a product department and product managers. In many cases, the way that is implemented is that product managers become the new business relationship managers, where you can't talk to the business, you can't talk to the customer, you have to go through me. And then we have IT or engineering over on the far right hand side, and we have brick walls in between all of these departments. This is the very frequent current state for many organizations due to the previous 4 technology-led revolutions, which have evolved in the context of repetitive manual physical labour. Even worse, over on the right, if you want to really, really slow things down, you have a brick wall between front end, middle tier and back end within IT, within software engineering, or it could be analysis, build and test. Still alive and kicking today. And obviously with work passing between those silos, work ends up sitting on the top of the brick wall, going nowhere. So in the context of unique change, this way of working is feast to famine. It's like the pig in the python. There's this big block of work, all of the analysis is done, all of the planning is done, and then it makes its way down the pipeline. It also results in work waiting. The flow efficiency, the amount of time that work is being worked on in the end-to-end lead time, is very low. The incentive is, I've done my bit. The hole is on your side of the boat. Like monkeys off my back, I've passed it on to you. Now it's with you, and the boat might be sinking, but not my problem. And you're not close to the consumer. So if you're one of the roles in the middle, you are not close to the consumer. Often, again, it's a case of you can't speak to the customer, you can't speak to the consumer, only I will. And then it's order giver, order taker. Here's what you need to do. And ultimately, it's inhumane. This is not a humane way of working. This is people as a cog in the machine. And this is not optimizing for better value, sooner, safer, and happier. So what might help? First of all, some principles. It's always good to bring things back to first principles. First of all, optimize for the flow of learning and value. We want thin slices of value early and often. And that's because in the age of digital, increasingly work is unknowable. We are not in a factory mass producing identical widgets. We have automation for physical work. We have automation for knowledge work. Increasingly, what we as people are doing in organizations is unique and unknowable. So therefore, because it's unknowable, We need to think big, start small, learn fast. We need to optimize for time to learning. The only way we can make the unknowable knowable is to act and minimize time to learning. The next principle, we also need long-lived small multidisciplinary teams aligned to consumer value. And this is stable teams over static teams. And the reason for this, again, is to optimize for the flow of learning and value. We don't want to play a relay race where we pass the baton. Instead, we want to move up and down the pitch together, like the game of rugby, hence the word scrum. We want to move up and down the pitch together with the ball, rather than work passing. We want to have high cohesion and low coupling. We want to break dependencies, not only manage them. As a principle, high cohesion, one job to do and do it well, with low coupling. Low coupling means we're minimizing dependencies, which means, again, we can optimize for the flow of learning and value. And the next principle is know your consumer. I like the word consumer rather than customer because quite often the consumer is internal. It's not necessarily external. And everybody should have consumer proximity with fast feedback. So ideally, everybody should be able to speak to either a consumer or a representative group of the consumer or a collection of consumers. There should be close proximity with fast feedback. The next principle is high alignment and high autonomy. This is outcomes over output. This is shared goals. When we have in our multidisciplinary teams, when we have a shared goal, we can actually have the concept of a team. If we have a multidisciplinary team where each individual is separately incentivized and separately still the work is flowing down through their role-based silo, you will not have a functional multidisciplinary team because the incentive will not be aligned. So we have to have aligned incentives, which means shared goals. OKRs are a really good way to have shared goals. Once you have high alignment, we're all going after the same thing together, and we have an incentive to help each other, then you can have high autonomy within minimal viable guardrails, which is the next principle, minimal viable guardrails, not laissez-faire, spurs on, do whatever the hell you want to do, equally not one size fits all, lowest common denominator. And this is around risk and compliance and governance. We want minimal viable guardrails based on your risk profile and your risk appetite, based on the uniqueness of what it is you're doing. And then the next principle is align value, people and tech. So the key for the unlock, the magic, is when the business architecture matches the people architecture, matches the technical architecture. This is an extension of Conway's law. And in particular, this is the value architecture in the organization. What are our things of value? What are our long-lived things of value? Matches the people architecture, matches the technical architecture, magic can happen. So we want to keep all three of those aligned. And the final principle is around continuous improvement. Super important to continuously improve and to incentivize continuous improvement. For those of you who are in leadership roles, or even as an individual contributor, it's super important to incentivize continuous improvement. You're never done improving. Impediments are not in the path, impediments are the path. And we need to continuously improve if we want to optimize for outcomes. So this is a set of principles on the pivot from role-based silos to organising for outcomes. So now let's have a look at the patterns. Peter Drucker is often quoted as saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. Turns out he never actually said it. And my corollary to that is incentives eat everything continuously. This whole topic around how we organise, around flow, around ways of working, my learning is it boils down to one word, which is the word incentive. And the flip side of the word incentive is threat. Work has changed, but our brains haven't. Our brains are wired for survival. and that is to seek incentive and to avoid threat. And our threat response is double the strength of our incentive response. It's double the strength, it kicks in twice as quickly, and it lasts twice as long. And we have a thing called loss aversion. We are wired to avoid a loss over seeking a gain. And that's because we would rather expend 500 calories running away from a rustle in the bushes than losing 20,000 calories when we're eaten by a tiger. So we would rather avoid a threat than seek an incentive, which means for many people in an organizational context, it's absolutely neurologically safer and you're more likely to survive by doing nothing, by trying nothing new, than actually by trying something and failing. And so we have a gravitational pull to not trying things. So there has to be psychological safety. And the pattern here is to be intentional about increasing the incentive and reducing the threat. And this is in particular when it comes to organising for outcomes and moving from role-based silos to multidisciplinary teams and multidisciplinary teams of teams. We have to be intentional about the implicit and explicit incentives. Implicit incentives is role modelling, behaviour, how, as a leader, how you behave and the behaviours you recognise, the soft skills, the behaviours that you recognise and reward in people, and the explicit incentive is pay and promotion and so on. And we need to consciously minimise the threat. The anti-pattern is accidentally increasing the threat and reducing the incentive. Most organisations, when they go about this topic of moving from role-based silos to multidisciplinary teams at scale, massively ramp up the threat. So, for example, one large organisation, everybody had to reapply for their jobs. There was 9 months of job insecurity. There were new job roles. People didn't really know what those job roles meant. Another organisation, 20,000 people were made redundant at the same time as doing this. Your threat response is off the chart at this point. I don't know if I've got a job. I don't know what this job title means. I don't know if I can survive. I don't know if I can pay the mortgage. You know what? I'm going to start looking in the market and see what other jobs exist out there. And that, unfortunately, is quite a common pattern. So instead, there is a need to be very intentional about minimizing threat. Think big, start small, learn fast, involve people in the communications, over communicate, don't go into a dark room and emerge with a finished product, co-create together, show that it's safe, and both implicit and explicit rewards for people. And it's your implicit and explicit incentives that drive your behaviors. And that's what culture is. Culture is the behavior. And behavior is driven, as I said, by implicit incentives, fitting in with this is how we do things around here. This is the behavioral norm around here. And explicit pay, promotion, job security, etc. And it is our behaviors that tend to drive the type of structure that we have in an organization. 3 types of structure. Number 1 is your formal structure, your reporting lines, which is in the HR system. Number 2, the actual team structure, for example, multidisciplinary teams, which is probably not in the HR system. And number 3, the social graph, which is how you actually get stuff done. So if you do some social graphing and you can see who are the key people, who's talking to who most of the time, and knowing who to call, knowing who to speak to get stuff done in the organization. And that structure may or may not reinforce the incentives. And key point here, just by moving to, for example, squads, tribes, value streams, crews, domains, fleets, whatever, circles, diamonds, whatever word you want to use, it does not necessarily mean that the incentives have changed. And this is where I've seen organizations get this wrong, is moving to value streams, moving to tribes, but then the incentives, as I said earlier, were still coming down the role-based silo, so there was no real teaming. And then what happens is about 2 years later or 3 years later, it all unravels. It all comes undone because there never really was a value stream, tribe, circle, diamond, whatever word, construct in the first place. There were no shared incentives. Key point, be intentional about shared incentives in order for this to work. And incentive and behavior is culture, and that's the real Spotify model, is the culture and the values at Spotify, not squads, tribes, chapters and guilds. It was the fact that they were able to experiment with that type of model back in 2012. This is an example of what I mean by incentive and behavior driving structure. This is a company or an organization or part of an organization where you have a single point of control, single point of command. You have a very a visionary, I don't know what the right word is, like kind of dictatorial, benevolent dictatorship type leader. You'll have the reality will be an org structure like that. This is another example, tongue in cheek. I'm sure you've seen this before. There are some organizations historically or even today who deliberately set up their business units to compete against each other. And then here's another example of a company. This company likes to sue its customers with a very large legal team. And then here is every single company, and here is your company. So the anti-pattern is org design or organizational evolution without being intentional about the incentives and the threats, which is unfortunately common. That anti-pattern is unfortunately very common. So organizing by value and flow. And there are a few names for this, for teams and teams of teams. This didn't take very long at all. I did a quick back of an envelope collection of words. I put a question on LinkedIn saying, what words are you aware of for teams and teams of teams? There are loads of words for this. At my latest count, I got to 55 different words for a team or a team of teams. Cell, chapter, circle, cluster, component team, COP, crew, diamond, division, domain, hive, huddle, journey, mission, etc., etc. Now, the term I like to use is value stream, and that's the term I'm going to use going forwards. So, organising by value stream. A value stream is a long-lived team of teams aligned to a bounded context of value and value consumers. We are optimizing for time to value and time to learning. There are three things you need to have a value stream. The minimal three things is a thing of value, and this is both a business product and a tech product. In some cases, it might, if you're a pure technology company, it might just be a tech product. For most organizations, for example, a bank, that could be a mortgage to buy a house is the business product, and a mortgage processing system might be the technology product that supports the business product. There are value consumers and there are value producers in multidisciplinary teams. The value consumers ideally are long-lived, and the value producers are also ideally long-lived. That's the bare bones anatomy of a value stream. And it's very unusual to have a thing of value without a roadmap and without any ongoing change. And even if you had something with no ongoing change, it would actually be a case of going backwards when the rest of the world moves forwards. So typically there will be a strategy and an outcome roadmap. 3-year OKRs, 1-year OKRs, and quarterly OKRs aligned. The pattern around leadership that I have found to work from having done this at scale is 3 leadership roles. The first one is the value owner, responsible for the why and the what. The second one is the delivery lead, responsible for how, and a servant leader looking inwardly, predominantly looking inwardly to support the team and to support continuous improving how we do what we do. And then the third role is the technical lead, again focused on the how from a technical perspective. That includes architecture within the value stream, technical architecture, data architecture. It includes how we do what we do technically, and also, like I said, data as well. Then we have value journeys. I prefer the term value journeys to customer journeys. A customer journey is a subset of a value journey. It's a bit like an iceberg. Above the water, you'll see the customer journey. But actually, when you look below the water, you can see everything else that has to happen for the value journey. And there will be data. Ideally, that data is self-contained within the value stream, is not exposed outside of the value stream, and is only accessible through APIs rather than directly. So that's the anatomy of a value stream. And then scaling it, value streams are nested. They're also networked. So here's an example of nested value streams. So this example is a hotel. And here we have the residential value stream and we have the event value stream. Within the residential value stream, we have another value stream, which is stay. And so here we might have a product which is a regular room, and then we might have a suite, or we might have the presidential suite, for example, for stay, or we might have individual booking and we might have group booking. We might have a corporate product and a individual retail product. And then we have events. Within events, we have the weddings value stream and the conferences value stream. They have their own long-lived products. They have their own multidisciplinary teams to deliver on these value streams. And then we have shared service value streams. For example, in the context of a hotel, catering, procurement, HR, legal, finance, data, etc. The shared service value stream provides services to the consumer-facing value streams above. And then we have our capabilities. So these are the old role-based silos. We have our, for example, software engineering capability. We might have a product management capability. We might have a quality capability. We have enablement teams. And the enablement teams are specialist secondary teams who are not needed the whole time, but will help support the value streams. So, for example, a ways of working Centre of Enablement, a WOW COE, is an enablement team. For example, the safety team construct from Sooner Safer Happier, where you have your multidisciplinary safety team, InfoSec, fraud, data privacy, compliance, etc. A long-lived safety team, that is a form of enablement team to support the value streams. And then we have our communities of practice, and the COPs are voluntary law of 2 feet. Now, importantly, your primary identity is in the value stream, not in your capability. So if you stop someone in the corridor and say, where do you work? They would say, oh, I work in weddings, I work in conferences, or in a financial services example, irrespective of your job role, I work in mortgages, I work in savings, I work in equity trading, rather than I work in IT. And you'll have your channel value streams, for example, web, mobile, store, branch, phone. And ideally, this would be omni-channel so that you can start in one channel and finish in another. And this is like the candles on the birthday cake. We've got the layers of the cake as the value streams, and we've got the candles on the cake to deliver up the rest of the cake to the customers. And as you can see, and again, this is where the value architecture matches the people architecture, matches the technical architecture. Ideally, you can construct your customer journeys as API calls across the value streams. And this is the case in financial services. This is actually a regulatory requirement that you can use the services of your retail bank via APIs. That's actually a regulatory requirement. So you're serving up the organization through APIs, creating your customer journeys. So that is a pattern around value stream alignment and how they nest. The patterns here, use whatever language works for you, 55 different terms. Beware, it will stick. There are some organizations who have used some certain words. In hindsight, wished they'd used some other words. It's very hard to change it once it's already being used. My advice is to use the same words at every level. e.g. value stream, to avoid forcing fixed levels. It won't be symmetrical. So I like to use the term value stream, value stream, value stream, value stream in terms of how they nest. Some parts of the organization might only go 2 deep, 2 value streams deep. Some might go 7 levels deep, depending on the size of that part of the organization. The Dunbar number, you don't want to artificially have to cram too many people into the definition of a team of teams or a team. Likewise, you don't want to artificially have, a team of 4 people, one person nested in 4 value streams because they had this particular part of the org is very small and had to put 4 people in 4 levels. I've seen that mistake made in companies, so I recommend using the same word. Don't only manage dependencies, break them as well. Customer journeys span value streams. Watch out for assuming that customer journeys are value streams in terms of the organizational construct of the company. Some customer journeys span value streams. So there isn't a one-to-one correlation between customer journeys and value streams. Each value stream will have customer journeys, but there will be some customer journeys that are not value streams because they're spanning value streams. Business architecture equals people architecture equals technical architecture. And start small, learn by doing, iterate. It won't be right first time. So how to get there, how to get going, start with the why, have clear, balanced and measurable outcomes, incentivize continuous improvement, nurture psychological safety, think big, start small, and learn by doing, invite natural champions, invite over inflict, and experiment, iterate, and enjoy the journey. Thank you very much.